Tonight we journey into one of the most powerful and debated events recorded in the Bible. Welcome, brick builders. I'm Archer, and this is where we take the stories we think we know and examine them more closely. Together we dig deeper to gain a better understanding of the world behind these biblical events. One of the clearest examples is the story of the 10 plagues of Egypt, an event that has inspired faith, debate, and fascination for thousands of years. At first glance, it's easy to look at Pharaoh and simply see a cruel ruler standing against God. But to truly understand what happened, we have to look beyond the surface and examine the world Pharaoh ruled over. Pharaoh was the leader of the most powerful empire of his time. Egypt was built on order, control, wealth, and pride. Everything depended on Pharaoh maintaining absolute authority. In many ways, the entire system rested on the belief that Pharaoh himself was protected by the gods of Egypt. That's where the real investigation begins. What makes the 10 plagues so remarkable isn't only that they happened, it's what they represented. Each plague directly challenged the gods Egypt trusted in, revealing that they had no power against the God of Israel. The plagues were not random disasters. They unfolded in a deliberate order, striking at the very foundations of Egyptian society. The first plague struck the Nile River itself. In ancient Egypt, the Nile was more than water. It was survival. It provided food, transportation, trade, farming, and life for the entire kingdom. Pharaoh believed Egypt controlled the Nile, but when the river turned to blood, people watched helplessly as fish died, drinking water disappeared, and the very thing Egypt depended on became a source of fear. Then came the frogs. In Egyptian culture, frogs were connected to fertility and life, but what once symbolized prosperity suddenly became overwhelming chaos. Frogs covered homes, temples, marketplaces, and palace floors. The plague transformed something familiar into something unbearable. Egypt could no longer control what flooded into their lives. After the frogs came the gnats and swarming insects. Dust filled the air as insects spread through the streets, homes, temples, and farmland. Even the priests who were responsible for maintaining ritual purity inside the temples could not escape it. The plague spread into every layer of society, from the palace to the poorest homes. Then Egypt's livestock began to die. Horses, cattle, oxen, sheep, and goats, the very foundation of Egypt's economy and agriculture, collapsed. For the Egyptian people, this was more than financial loss. Livestock represented transportation, farming power, trade, food, and survival. The kingdom's wealth was beginning to disappear before Pharaoh's eyes. But the destruction did not stop there. Hail and fire fell across the land, destroying crops and farmland throughout Egypt. Fields were ruined, trees were shattered. The food supply that sustained the empire was collapsing. Fear spread rapidly as Egypt's confidence in its gods and rulers began to weaken. Then came the locusts. Massive swarms swept across the land, consuming what little remained after the storms. Whatever crops had survived were stripped away. Egypt was no longer facing isolated disasters. It was watching its entire system unravel piece by piece. And finally, darkness covered the land. For 3 days, Egypt was consumed by darkness so deep that people could barely move through the streets. This plague directly challenged Ra, the sun god, one of Egypt's most powerful deities. The kingdom that once appeared unstoppable was now powerless beneath the shadow, falling across the land. Then came the final plague. Throughout Egypt, grief and fear spread across the kingdom. The palace fell silent. Families mourned quietly inside their homes. Pharaoh, the ruler who once appeared untouchable, now stood before a kingdom broken by loss, fear, and uncertainty. The God of Israel had not simply challenged Pharaoh, he had dismantled the very system Egypt trusted in. But perhaps the most important question is not what happened to Egypt, but why this story has survived for thousands of years. Empires rise, kingdoms grow powerful, leaders believe their systems will last forever. Yet history shows that even the strongest civilizations can fall when pride replaces wisdom and power replaces humility. The story of the 10 plagues was never only about destruction, it was also about warning, accountability, and the limits of human control. Ancient Egypt believed its gods, wealth, armies, and rulers made it untouchable. But in the end, none of those things could stop what was coming. And maybe that's why this story still resonates today, because every generation eventually faces the same question. What happens when power believes it no longer has to answer to anything greater than itself? This is Archer, and I'll see you next time on Bible Brick Tales. Don't forget to subscribe to Bible Brick Tales. Thanks for watching.